a person was convicted of theft and sentenced to prison in 2015. Then, in 2017, a new law increased the threshold amounts for theft, meaning the same act would now carry a lighter penalty. Can this new law apply retroactively and reduce the sentence? Yes, and that law is Republic Act number 10,951. In Part 9, we covered the extraterritoriality principle, the 5 instances where Philippine criminal law reaches beyond our borders. Now, we're closing out Chapter 1 with the third and final characteristic, prospectivity. This principle governs the time element of criminal law, when a law takes effect and whether it can apply to acts committed before its passage. And the biggest real-world application of this principle in recent Philippine history is Republic Act number 10,951. The general rule is simple. Penal laws operate prospectively. A new criminal law applies only to acts committed after it takes effect. This is rooted in Article 366 of the Revised Penal Code, and more importantly, in the Constitution itself. Article 3, Section 22 prohibits ex post facto laws and bills of attainder. An ex post facto law is one that retroactively makes an act criminal, increases the penalty for an act already committed, or changes the rules of evidence to the disadvantage of the accused. The Constitution flatly prohibits this. You cannot punish someone for something that wasn't a crime when it was done. But there's a critical exception. Under Article 22 of the Revised Penal Code, penal laws shall have retroactive effect insofar as they favor the person guilty of a felony, provided that the offender is not a habitual criminal. This is the principle of favorable retroactivity. So if a new law reduces the penalty for a crime or decriminalizes an act entirely, that new law applies retroactively, even to those already convicted and serving sentence. The rationale is compassion and justice. If the state has determined that a lesser punishment is now appropriate, those already punished under the old, harsher regime should benefit. Now, what about repeal? When a penal law is repealed, the effect depends on how it was repealed. If the repeal is absolute, meaning the old law is simply abolished without a replacement, then pending cases under the old law are dismissed. The act is no longer a crime, so there's nothing to prosecute. But if the repeal is by reenactment or substitution, meaning a new law replaces the old one but the act remains criminal, pending cases continue under the new law. The crime still exists, only the specific statute has changed. Now let's talk about the landmark law, Republic Act number 10,951, signed into law on August 29, 2017. This law adjusted the amounts and penalties for crimes against property under the revised penal code, amounts that hadn't been updated since 1932. Think about it. Under the old RPC, theft of property worth more than 22,000 pesos carried the penalty of prison mayor. But 22,000 pesos in 1932 is vastly different from 22,000 pesos in 2017. So Republic Act 10,951 updated the threshold. Now, the same penalty of prison mayor applies only when the value exceeds 1,200,000 pesos. The impact was massive. Thousands of inmates convicted of theft, estafa, and malicious mischief suddenly qualified for reduced penalties or even immediate release because the value of the property involved fell below the new thresholds. The Supreme Court confirmed in Hernan versus Sandigan Bayan in 2018 that Republic Act 10,951 applies retroactively under Article 22 of the RPC because it is favorable to the accused. Even those with final convictions could petition for modification of their sentences. So here's the complete framework. Penal laws are prospective. They apply only to future acts. Ex post facto laws are constitutionally prohibited. But under Article 22 of the RPC, a new law that is favorable to the accused applies retroactively, even to final convictions. And when a law is repealed, check whether it's absolute repeal or repeal by reenactment to determine the effect on pending cases. Republic Act 10,951 is the textbook example of favorable retroactivity in action. And that's a wrap. That was part 10, the finale of our Fundamental Principles series. We've covered all 3 characteristics, the 2 penal systems, the Simon Principle, suppletory application, and every major exception. If you watched all 10 parts, you now have a solid foundation in Chapter 1. Salamat sa pagsunod. Subscribe, share, and like YouTube for law's sake, and I'll see you in the next chapter.